You don't have to come back." As Ken says this, he closes the car door. In a panic, I cling to the car. "If you leave me here, you're gonna regret it." "That's only if someone sees us, right? There are no surveillance cameras in the middle of the mountains." Ken laughs. Annoyed, I pound on the car window. "Cut it out! Open the door now!" "Shut up. You're not my real parent, you have no right to complain." "See ya." Ken speeds off in the car. Helplessly, I'm left behind. Eventually, a deep sigh escapes me. Before I know it, I've collapsed on the spot. Even if I'm not his biological parent, I can't believe he'd leave me in such a place. Thinking back, whenever Ken got into trouble, I, not being his biological parent, always smoothed things over too easily. But that was a mistake. I should have been stricter with him sooner. Even if it's by marriage, I'm Ken's mother. Teaching him how to take responsibility is the only thing I can do as a parent. I'm not going to forgive you this time. Slowly, I stand up. My name is Ida Nathaniel. I'm a 40-year-old housewife. In college, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and the aftermath left the right side of my body paralyzed. That's why I became a housewife after getting married. With a cane, daily life isn't much of an issue. My husband, Tom, supports me, and my daughter, Emily, often helps me out. So, I'd like to say there's nothing I'm struggling with, but there's one thing. My son, Ken, is constantly defying me. I think it's because he's my stepson. Actually, Ken and Emily are Tom's kids from a previous marriage. When I married Tom, Ken was in high school. Emily, who was in middle school at the time, was such a sweet kid, but Ken had been defying me from the start. And now, even as an adult, Ken still defies me. He doesn't have a steady job and is causing me a lot of stress. The first time I met Ken was a few days after Tom proposed to me. "My daughter is really excited about the marriage and has been nagging me to introduce you as soon as possible," Tom said, somewhat embarrassed. So, I suggested we have a dinner together with the kids. We decided to go to a nearby restaurant. It was a small place, and I was the only one there. I waited nervously under those circumstances. Eventually, Tom and the two kids showed up. Emily spotted me right away and ran over. "Hi there. You're Ida, right?" "Yes, I am. I'm Emily, his daughter. Nice to meet you." Emily smiled and bowed. Relieved, I returned the gesture. The dinner started off in a friendly manner, but Ken, who was also there, looked sullen, wouldn't speak to me, and wouldn't even make eye contact. Unable to stand it, Tom nudged Ken. "Ken, at least say hello." "Huh? Why should I?" "Because Ida is going to be your mother," Tom said firmly. However, Ken snorted dismissively. "Mother? I don't accept her as my mom. What's with that attitude?" At that time, Ken was a high school student. It's not too far-fetched to say it was a difficult age. But Emily, who was only 2 years younger, was quite friendly towards me. Logically, it wouldn't have been surprising if middle school-aged Emily had the same attitude. Anyway, thinking it was best not to rush things, I tried to calm down Tom, who was irritated by Ken's attitude. "It's okay, Tom. I understand it's hard to suddenly be told you have a new mom." "I'm sorry." Tom looks apologetic. Sitting next to him, Emily also bows her head to me. "I'm sorry for the rude things my brother said." "It's all right. It's understandable to be confused. Ida is such a wonderful person, and you should apologize too, Ken." Emily tugs at Ken's sleeve. But Ken just turns away. I wonder if everything will be all right. I ended the dinner feeling uncertain about my relationship with Ken. There's no doubt Ken was opposed to our marriage. However, he never openly interfered. On the other hand, Emily was more actively supportive of us. Thanks to her, our marriage went smoothly. Needless to say, things got tough after we registered our marriage. Once we started living together, Ken clearly began to show his defiance. "What's this? This food tastes awful. Didn't suit your taste? I'm sorry. Dog food would be better than this, Ken said as he threw the meal I had prepared into the trash. What are you doing? Shut up. I'm just throwing away trash. With those words, Ken left the house. I sighed as I watched his back. Parenting is hard. I spent many days troubled by these new experiences. Meanwhile, Emily was truly a sweet child. Moreover, Emily often came to me for advice. I want to go shopping for clothes on Sunday. Ida, will you come with me? Sure, but wouldn't you rather go with your friends? I asked, to which Emily bashfully looked down. No, I want to go with you, Ida. I mean, I want the opinion of an adult woman. Okay, I understand. Really? Thank you. Emily jumps with joy. That's how quickly Emily warmed up to me. Being a girl, there were things she found hard to discuss with her dad. Maybe that's why she felt that way. I totally get it because I've been there. Anyway, Emily started calling me like this soon after. Hey, Mom, can I talk to you for a sec? Of course. Wait, did you just say Mom? Yeah. I want to call you that from now on. Is that okay? Of course it is. I hugged Emily while shedding tears. I was that happy. Watching us, Ken looked on with cold eyes and snorted mockingly. What's this? Trying to be like a movie? It's none of your business, brother. Right. I don't want to end up having to take care of her later. I definitely don't want her for a mom. Ken laughed as he walked out. My heart ached. Are you okay, Mom? I'm fine, Emily. Ken is just as much my precious child as you are. Despite my words, my heart was filled with anxiety. Can I really understand Ken? Maybe it's better to think of him as my own child. Various thoughts crossed my mind, but no clear answer emerged as time simply passed by. As time went on, Ken graduated from high school. However, unlike Emily, who advanced to middle school, Ken didn't pursue further education after high school. Naturally, Tom scolded Ken. What are you planning to do now? Parents are supposed to take care of you until you're an adult. And what about after that? Tom pressed. Ken stumbled a bit in his response. Well, I'll think about that when the time comes. Ken's gaze wandered. Tom, suspicious, grilled him further. You haven't thought about anything, have you? Don't make stuff up. I have thought about it. I've got a part-time job lined up. Really? Can we drop it? I need to get ready for the job. Ken stomped off to his room. Soon after, the sound of a door closing could be heard. He's still such a child. I think he's trying in his own way. Let's trust him. Tom sighed deeply. It's hard to know what Ken is thinking. But he might genuinely be struggling with life. That's why I suggested we keep an eye on him. About a month had passed since then. Since that day, Ken has been going out frequently. He claims he's working hard at his job. I was relieved to hear that. One day, someone came to visit. I asked Emily to answer the door, and a long conversation began at the entrance. Wondering what was going on, I slowly made my way to the front door. Emily? Who's here? Oh, Mom. It's Ken's friend. Emily points to the person at the entrance. There stood a young man. Hello. I'm a classmate of Ken. The young man's name is Harry. He lives nearby and seems to be a friend and classmate of Ken. Harry also seems to know Emily. Harry starts, looking somewhat apologetic. Actually, I lent Ken some money. Money? Harry hesitantly explained the situation. The story goes back a bit. It was just a few days after Tom had confronted Ken. Ken had gone to see Harry. That's when Ken begged him. Harry, can you lend me some money? I'm about to be kicked out by my parents. Your father wouldn't do that, would he? It's not him. It's the new mom. She's greedy for money, and neither I nor Emily get any allowance. More so, we're being worked to the bone for living expenses. She said she'd kick me out if I don't earn more. Ken told Harry about me like that. Mom's not like that, Emily immediately retorted. Harry was taken aback by her response. So, why does Ken need the money? Harry pondered. But more importantly, there was something else I was curious about. Harry, how much did you lend Ken? It was $2,000. $2,000? I'm so sorry, I'll pay you back right away. I went to my room to get the money. I opened the drawer of my desk to look for my bank book. Where's my card? Before getting married, I worked at a regular company and saved some money. However, I couldn't find the card with that money. Wondering why, I rummaged through the desk. But my card was nowhere to be found. Eventually, while I was still looking, Tom came home. After learning about the situation, Tom promised to pay back the money, and we sent Harry home for the day. A little while later, Ken came home. Tom immediately confronted him. So, it's been found out, huh? And I had just prepared the money to pay back Harry. He had run out of money for fun and borrowed from Harry. The part about starting a part-time job was a lie. He was just pretending to go to work and instead was hanging out. After saying that, Ken took something out of his pocket. With a sulky face, he threw it on the table. At that moment, an exclamation of surprise escaped me. Because what Ken had taken out was my card. Ken, did you take this? I just borrowed it to pay back Harry. I'll return it someday. Ken snorted. I raised my voice in anger at his attitude. Taking things without permission is a crime. I said I'd return it. Besides, we're family. Theft within a family living together doesn't count as a crime, right? He didn't seem to feel guilty at all. My patience was running thin. Enough is enough. You can't just do whatever you want. Before me, Tom scolded Ken. But Ken retorted with a calm face. Cut it out. It's none of Dad's business. That's it, I've reached my limit. You're going to stay with our relative's factory. At that moment, Ken's face changed. He asked, bewildered. Joking, right, Dad? It's no joke. You're going to get straightened out at that factory. Wait, but that place. Ken began to plead. I heard later that this relative is known to be strict. Ken often got scolded at family gatherings. And still fears him. Ultimately, that very day, Tom took Ken to the relative's house. And Tom asked if Ken could work their live-in, bowing his head in the request. I was told by Tom when he got back home. I'm really sorry, Aita. I'll definitely pay back the money. It's meaningless unless Ken repays it himself. But was this the right thing to do? This should teach Ken a lesson. We'll think about the future after he reflects. Yeah, I guess so. I could only respond with a vague smile. I hoped this experience would make Ken reflect. But what if it didn't? Well, there's no use worrying about it now. For now, we just had to leave it to Tom. I had my misgivings, but decided to do so. Despite my worries, it seemed Ken was genuinely reflecting. According to the relative, Ken was working hard. And getting along well with his coworkers, even listening to his boss properly. Finally, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. A year later, Ken came back home. However, he still works at the relative's factory. He continued to leave the house on time every morning. He really seemed to have reformed. While I felt somewhat emotional about this, Emily, who had graduated from community college, got a job at a local bank. It seemed she even had a boyfriend, and I was living peacefully. One day, on my way back from a regular medical checkup, I was waiting for the bus when suddenly Ken's car stopped in front of me. Ken? Isn't it still noon? What about work? I'm off for the afternoon today. I'm heading home now, get in. People can change. It was hard to believe this was the same person who had been so defiant. I was so happy I nearly cried. But I held back the tears and got into the car. It's about a 30-minute drive home. With that thought, I fell asleep. When I woke up, the car was stopped. Thinking I had overslept, I jumped up. Ken wasn't in the driver's seat. Rushing outside, I saw Ken playing with his smartphone. Sorry, I fell asleep. It's fine. It worked out for me anyway. Worked out? I asked, then I realized something. All I could see around us were trees. Clearly, we were in the middle of the woods. There was also a cliff nearby. The ground was all dirt, and I stumbled. As I fell, Ken quickly grabbed my cane. Give it back! Huh? You don't need this thing anymore. Laughing, Ken threw my cane down the cliff. I watched it fall, stunned. Ken added insult to injury. I've got my reasons, and I've decided it's best if you leave. What do you mean? You don't have to come back. Saying this, Ken closed the car door. In a panic, I clung to the car. If you leave me here, you're gonna regret it. That's only if someone sees us, right? There are no surveillance cameras in the middle of these woods. Ken laughed. Annoyed, I pounded on the car window. Cut it out! Open the door now! Shut up. You're not my real parent, you have no right to complain. See ya. Ken sped off in the car. Helplessly, I was left behind. Eventually, a deep sigh escaped me. Before I knew it, I had collapsed on the spot. Even if I'm not his biological parent, I can't believe he'd leave me in such a place. Thinking back, whenever Ken got into trouble, I, not being his biological parent, always smoothed things over too easily. But that was a mistake. I should have been stricter with him sooner. Even if it's by marriage, I'm Ken's mother. Teaching him how to take responsibility is the only thing I can do as a parent. I won't forgive him this time. Slowly, I stood up. Whether it's fortunate or not, the road that Ken's car had taken was in front of me. Given my partial paralysis, a car was absolutely necessary to carry me. I just need to follow the road the car went down. I wasn't just left somewhere on a hiking trail. I was sure I could make it somehow. With that determination, I started walking along the road. But without my cane, I couldn't walk properly. I had no choice but to look for a suitable stick. I used it as a cane and walked slowly. The road I was walking on wasn't paved, even though cars could pass through it. Moreover, it seemed to be a maintenance road for the mountain, branching off here and there. Eventually, I got lost in the mountains. Sadly, my bag was left in the car. This is practically a distress situation. I didn't have my smartphone or a bottle of water. And it was getting dark. I couldn't call for help. I thought this might be the end. That's when I saw a small light. I shouted out loud. Someone help me! I heard a woman's voice. Voices of several men reached me. I was saved. I felt relieved. Soon, a few men approached. One of them asked me. Good to see you're safe, Ms. Marshall. Eh? Marshall? You are Ms. Marshall, right? No, that's not me. Somehow, our conversation didn't match up. The men, who I assumed were a search party, also looked perplexed. Anyway, let's get you down the mountain first. On the way down, I listened to the stories of the men who had rescued me. It became clear that there was a misunderstanding. The people who rescued me were part of a search team / but they weren't looking for me. They were searching for another woman around my age. She had gone into the mountains to forage for wild plants. And had injured herself along the way, calling for help herself, and the search team was on their way to rescue her. It just so happened that they encountered me in the process. In any case, I was saved thanks to that woman. Incidentally, that woman was found and rescued by another search team almost simultaneously. As we descended the mountain, the search team asked me, "Please tell me a family contact." That's when I had an idea. I could use this situation to teach Ken a lesson. Please contact my daughter. I asked them to reach out to Emily. Afterwards, I headed to the hospital just to be safe. Before long, I was reunited with Emily, who rushed to the hospital. Emily hugged me, crying. You must have been scared, Mom. I'm sorry, Emily. But why did you go into the mountain? Asked by Emily, I hesitated, but I couldn't keep it hidden. If that was the case, it was better to be honest and get Emily's cooperation. I made up my mind and told Emily everything. What? That's a crime. Emily was furious. I continued while stroking Emily's head. Calm down, Emily. How can I calm down? I won't be satisfied until he's turned in to the police, even if he's my brother. Actually, there's a better way than that, and I want your help with it. I told Emily about the plan I came up with while being transported to the hospital. She listened and nodded. So, that's the plan. Can you do it? I'll do it. Leave it to me. After finishing our talk, a nurse informed us that the tests showed no issues. Tom, who had been contacted by Emily, also came to pick us up. However, we didn't go home. Instead, Tom and I went to a nearby internet cafe. Meanwhile, Emily was sent home first. Around the time Emily should have arrived home, Tom's phone rang with a call from Emily. I'm outside the house right now, but I can hear my brother's laughter from inside. You could tell she was angry just by her voice. I took the phone from Tom. Emily? Then, as planned, okay? Leave it to me. Saying so, Emily went inside the house, keeping the phone line open. Soon, Emily and Ken's conversation could be heard through the phone. Tom and I listened closely. I'm home. Where's Mom? She said something about going back to her hometown. Ken replied with a laugh. I felt angry hearing that. And Emily must have felt the same. However, Emily continued as if nothing was wrong. Did you hear about the person who neglected their parents' care? Eh? What's this all of a sudden? Ken's voice sounded shaken. But Emily continued, pretending not to notice. Someone in the neighborhood, they went on a trip because they hated caregiving. Oh, really? You could get arrested for something like that. The moment Emily said that, a loud thud was heard. Your phone dropped, brother. Yeah. Ken sounded quite flustered. I listened with a grin as the conversation continued. So, why would someone get arrested for that? If you neglect someone, it's considered abandonment. Especially if it's a child, an elderly parent, or someone who is physically disabled. Emily threatened Ken, implying it could be considered a crime of neglect. I have paralysis on my right side, but I don't require care. However, it's difficult to walk without a cane. Being left in the mountains in such a state, the implications are clear without saying. Ken seemed to realize this quickly. With a slightly trembling voice, he asked Emily. What kind of punishment does that carry? Neglect? I think it's imprisonment for 3 months up to 5 years. Imprisonment! He was obviously shaken. I couldn't stop smirking. Then, the sound of the living room door opening was heard. At the same time, Emily's flustered voice echoed. Where are you going, brother? No, just feeling a bit. I'm going to bed. That was the last we heard from Ken. Then, Emily's whisper came through. How did it go? It went well. He seems pretty scared. Yeah. He was pale as a ghost. Emily's voice was cheerful. I took a breath before continuing. Emily, I'm leaving the house to you. And I'm sending Dad back home. Hey, I can't leave you alone. If we don't go back, it'll look suspicious. Speaking as if scolding a child, Tom nodded in agreement. That's true. So, we'll continue with the plan tomorrow, okay? Got it. After confirming Emily's response, I hung up the phone. I returned the smartphone to Tom and sent him home. I stayed at the internet cafe. Modern internet cafes have plenty of space to lie down. I was able to spend the night without suffering from lack of sleep. The next morning, Tom came to visit me early. I brought this from Emily. What Tom handed over was a smartphone that Emily had previously used. When turned on, it was fully charged. Can you use that? Yes, I can. I had her put my SIM card in it. My belongings were still in Ken's car. That included my smartphone. But taking out the smartphone would let Ken know I was safe. So, I asked Emily to only remove the SIM card. All that was left was to insert the SIM card into another phone. This way, it would become my phone. For now, let's check on the two of them. I took Tom back to the internet cafe room. Sitting in front of the computer, I performed a certain operation. All set. The living room of our house appeared on the computer screen. Tom watched curiously. How are you doing this? It's like a video conference. Emily is using the computer at home. While we were talking, Ken appeared on the computer. He staggered into view and sat down on the sofa. Then, Emily suddenly turned on the TV. Then, a particular news segment started. It was about a hiker who had gone missing in the mountains. Looks like it's nearby, Emily said to Ken. Ken stared blankly at the TV. At that moment, Ken started to tremble. Emily asked him in an exaggerated tone. What's wrong, brother? Nothing. The news reported that a woman in her 40s had gone missing in the mountains. A search team was currently looking for her. And the police were investigating the situation. That was all it said. No details were given. Ken mistakenly thought it was about me. Of course, it wasn't a real news report. Emily had cleverly edited a genuine news report to display on the TV. The original news was about another woman who had been injured in the mountains. However, Ken, feeling guilty, didn't realize it was edited. His flustered reaction was too amusing. While I was holding back laughter, Ken stood up. What's wrong, brother? That thing from yesterday, what was it? Something about neglecting. Neglect? The one with the prison sentence? Emily emphasized. At that moment, Ken visibly flinched. This is bad. If this continues. Ken began pacing the room, mumbling to himself. I watched him for a while, but he was just fretting without making any changes. Thinking the suspense wasn't enough, I decided to set a trap. I used the smartphone Emily gave me to call Ken's phone. As soon as the phone rang, Ken jumped. Scrambling, Ken answered the phone. Hello? Ken? It's Mom. Who? Who is this? Ken's voice trembled in fear. I took my time before revealing. The caller ID shows, doesn't it? Ken's action of checking his phone screen was visible through the computer. Why are you calling? Aw! Ken screamed and ran out of the living room. However, he soon returned, clutching my purse in his hand. Why, he mumbled as he searched through the purse. Eventually, Ken found my smartphone and clutched his head, screaming. I was wrong. Please don't haunt me. Saying so, Ken rushed out of the house, heading straight for the police station, it seemed. Shortly after, Tom received a call from the police. The message was as follows. Your son has turned himself in, claiming he's responsible for his mother's death. Please come to the station to clarify the situation. Hearing this, I went to the police station with Tom. Ken was there. He was speaking honestly with the police officers. However, the moment Ken saw me, he screamed as if he'd seen a ghost. Ah! She's here! Ken crumpled to the ground, covering his head. At that moment, I admittedly thought I might have gone too far. It took several hours for Ken to grasp the situation. So, I intended to teach him a lesson. I see. However, if that story is true, we can't just overlook it. The police officer said, frowning. I understand the sentiment well. One wrong step, and I could have been in mortal danger. But surely, he must have learned his lesson by now. Personally, I want to make him atone in a different way. That's why I decided to settle this matter quietly. Aside from that, there's something I'm curious about. It's the reason why Ken did such a thing. If he didn't want to be with me, he could have just left the house. Ken is still working at the relative's factory. He could have lived on his own. I just can't wrap my head around it. Anyway, we'll talk more about it once we get home. Tom and I left the police station with Ken in tow. Emily was waiting for us in front of the police station. But she looked stern for some reason. What's wrong, Emily? There's something I need to tell my brother. Tell him? I asked, and Emily pointed to a spot a little away. There stood Harry and an unfamiliar man. The moment he saw them, Ken started shaking again. And quickly hid behind me. What's wrong, Ken? It's not what you think. I was planning to pay it back. Ken cried out before collapsing. I could only shake my head. Soon after, Harry and the man approached us. That's when I finally understood the situation. The man with Harry was Ken's senior from high school, named Martin. Ken had borrowed money from this senior named Martin. It seems Ken had been gambling with the money he borrowed. He had also poured most of his salary from work into gambling. His days were spent in a cycle of borrowing and gambling. Eventually, his debt had ballooned to an amount he couldn't pay back. Just then, Martin started demanding repayment. In trouble, Ken turned his attention to Emily's savings. Using the same method he did with my money, he now took Emily's bank book. However, the account in Emily's bank book had hardly any money in it. After opening the account, Emily had transferred the funds to another account using a smartphone app. It wouldn't show up in the bank book. So, although there was a balance recorded, the account was actually empty. Because of what had happened with me, Emily had taken this precaution. As a result, unable to get his hands on any money, Ken then targeted my life insurance. What are you thinking? I didn't say to repay me by doing such things. Martin was furious. It seemed he was a decent person. It's not like that. I was just... Enough. I won't give you any more extensions for repayment. The moment he was told this, Ken suddenly got pale. He started apologizing, crying and saying, I'll definitely repay you, please. No way. Work off your debt at our company. Anything but that, please. But Martin showed no signs of forgiveness. Realizing this, Ken then turned to me and Tom, begging. Please, Dad. Lend me the money. Aita, you too, right? Please. He seemed to be thinking only of himself. Proof of this was the complete lack of any apology to Emily. I was utterly dismayed. It seems not forgiving him was the right choice. Sighing, I turned my back on Ken. And got into Emily's car. Wait a minute. Ignoring Ken's plea. Tom did the same. Lastly, as I stuck my face out of the window, I told the bewildered Martin and Harry. Feel free to collect the debt as you like. Of course, within the limits of the law, okay? Martin nodded firmly to my words. Afterward, Ken was taken to work for Martin's company. It appears to be a construction-related company. Especially handling various constructions in the mountains, and it's not uncommon for workers to stay overnight at the site. Moreover, while heavy machinery is transported by helicopter, it seems the workers have to walk to the site. Knowing it was a harsh work environment, Ken must have been desperately apologizing. But all that was in vain. Ken had to leave his job at the relative's factory. Now, he works for Martin's compan. At a remote site unknown to me. However, occasionally, Ken transfers money to me. It seems like he's repaying the money he took. According to Harry, Martin has ordered him to pay back the full amount. Until the repayment is completed, he can't return home, it seems. Anyway, since he's in the mountains, there's no escaping, and I hope this time he truly reforms. Meanwhile, peace has returned to our lives. I've heard that Emily's relationship is going well. Hey, Mom. My boyfriend is planning to visit for a greeting. Oh. Is it about marriage? Maybe. Emily blushed. Such moments filled me with indescribable love. I had given up on marriage and becoming a mother. But Emily made me a mother. So, I'll do everything I can for my daughter. For Emily, who brought smiles to my life.